dasi, 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 dasi. Champakalata Sakhi.
So
okay.
Thank
you.
The
floor is yours. We're all good. We're live on YouTube. We're good to go. Hare Krishna.
Thank you, Prabhu. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jaya Gopi Jana Devi Jaya Gopi Jana Ashodanandana Vajajanarayana Ashodanandana Vajajanarayana Namunatira Avanachari Namunatira Avanachari Jaya Radha Radha Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Hare Rama, Hare Rama. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama. Prabhupada. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 10, chapter 29, verses 10 to 11. Dushaha preshta viraha tivra tapa dusha subha dhyana prapcha tu tashlesha nivritya shina mangala tameva paramatmanam jara budya pisangata jahur guna mayam deham sadhya prakshina bandhana dushaha preshta viraha tivra tapa dusha subha dhyana prapcha chuta shlesha nivritya shena mangala tameva paramatmanam jara budhyapi sangata jahur gunam hayam deham sadhya prakshina bandhana. Synonyms: dushaha, intolerable. Preshta, from their beloved. Viraha, from separation. Tivra, intense. Tapa, by the burning pain. Duta, removed. Ashubha, all inauspicious things in their hearts. Dhyana, by meditation. Prapta, obtained. Achyuta, of the infallible Lord Sri Krishna. Ashlesha, caused by the embrace. Nirvritya, by the joy. Shina, reduced to nil. Mangala, their auspicious karmic reactions. Tam, him. Eva, even though. Parma Atmanam, the super soul. Jara, far more. Buddhya, thinking him to be. Api, nevertheless. Sangataha, getting his direct association. Jahu, they gave up. Gunamayam, composed of the modes of material nature. Deham, their bodies. Sadhya, immediately. Prakshina, thoroughly counteracted. Bandhana, all their bondage of karma. Translation and purport by the disciples of His Divine Grace. A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada ki. It's a long purport, so everyone stay super focused and just cling on to every single word, going deeply into hearing. For those gopis who could not go to see Krishna, intolerable separation from their beloved caused an intense agony that burned away all impious karma. By meditating upon him, they realized his embrace, and the ecstasy they then felt exhausted their material piety. Although Lord Krishna is the supreme soul, these girls simply thought of him as their male lover and associated with him in that intimate mood. Thus their karmic bondage was nullified, and they abandoned their gross material bodies. Purport. Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti comments upon this verse as follows. Here Sukadeva Goswami speaks in a peculiar way. He presents the intimate object the gopis attained as if it were an external idea, thus keeping its true nature secret from outsiders, while at the same time he reveals to the confidential devotees, well versed in the scientific conclusions of devotional service, the internal meaning that is his real purport. Thus, to outsiders, Sukadeva says that Krishna gave the gopis liberation, but to the confidential hearers, Sukadeva reveals that when the gopis experienced separation from their beloved, there arose in them both immeasurable unhappiness and immeasurable happiness, and that they gradually achieved their desired goal. Thus, the verse can be understood as follows. Because of their intolerable separation from their beloved, the gopis felt terrible agony, by which they caused all inauspicious things to tremble. In other words, when people in general hear of the gopis' extreme agony and separation from their beloved, they abandon thousands of inauspicious things, things even as fearsome as the subterranean fires of millions of universes or the powerful poison swallowed by Lord Shiva. More specifically, those who hear of the gopis' love and separation give up their terrible false ego and thinking themselves defeated are shaken. When the gopis meditated on Lord Achyuta, he became manifest and personally came to them, and they experienced great joy by embracing his body, which was full of transcendental love for them. The gopis also experienced great joy by exhibiting personal characteristics and a sense of identification appropriate to such love. That joy made all their good fortune, both material and spiritual, seem paltry by comparison. The implication is that when other persons see how happy the gopis became upon embracing Krishna when he manifested himself directly before them, these other persons feel that thousands of so-called auspicious objects are insignificant by comparison, including all the sense gratificatory pleasures found in millions of universes, and even the supersensory pleasure of spiritual bliss, Brahmananda. Thus, hearing of the gopis' distress and the joy that arose respectively out of their separation from the Supreme Lord and their union with him, anyone can get rid of all the reactions of his past activities, both sinful and pious. Vaishnavas certainly do not think that sinful and pious reactions can be destroyed only by being lived out, since after all, neither separation from the Supreme Lord nor direct association with him are in the category of karma. This kind of elimination of karmic reactions occurs in the stage of bhajan for those who have come to the level of anartha-nivritti. And thus the gopis thought of Krishna, the Paramatma or supreme worthy object of all love, as their paramour. Even though such a concept is ordinarily contemptible, the gopis realized Krishna in an even fuller sense than did Rukmini and his other queens, who thought of him most respectfully as their husband. That thinking of the Lord as one's paramour is superior to thinking of him as one's husband is proved by the fact that unbridled pure love is superior to domesticated love. This idea is borne out by the following words of Sri Uddhava. Yadustyajam svajanam aryapatam cha hitva. These ladies of Raj abandon their families and their advanced religious principles, even though to do so is very difficult. In his pastimes on earth, Krishna often turns the most lowly things into the most elevated. As Bhishma stated, Krishna's pastime of acting as Arjuna's chariot driver was even more elevated than the pastimes in which he acted as a mighty king of kings. Vijaya Rata Kudumbo Ata Totre Drita Haya Rasmini Tat Triyesh Kaniye. I concentrate upon the chariot driver of Arjuna, who stood with a whip in his right hand and a bridle rope in his left, and who was very careful to protect Arjuna's chariot by all means. Similarly, in the Lord's appearance as Krishna, we see that the normally inferior conjugal ras becomes better than the normally superior mood of Shantaras, as also the attitude of loving a paramour becomes superior to the loving exchange between legitimate spouses, and lowly gunja necklaces, red oxide paste, and peacock feathers become better than the most excellent jeweled ornaments. But it may be objected, it is not fitting for the Supreme Lord to sport with women whose bodies have already been enjoyed by other men. This objection is replied to by the words beginning Jahu. The word deham is used here in the singular form to indicate unity of category, even though the gopis are many. Some authorities say that by the power of Yoga Maya, these gopis' bodies disappeared in a way no one noticed. But other authorities say that the body referred to in this context is the inferior body, composed of the modes of material nature. Thus, by the prominence of the active guna mayam, it is understood that before the gopis heard the sound of Krishna's flute, their bodies had been twofold, material and spiritual, and upon hearing the flute, they gave up the material bodies, which their husbands had enjoyed. We may analyze this as follows. When devotees begin prosecuting devotional service in accordance with the instructions of a bona fide spiritual master, they engage their ears and other senses in pure devotion by hearing of the Lord, chanting his glories, remembering him, offering obeisances to him, giving him personal attendance, and so forth. Thus the devotees make the Lord's transcendental qualities the objects of their senses, as stated by the Lord himself. Nirgunu Mana Pashraya. In this way, the devotees' bodies transcend the material modes. Yet sometimes the devotees may take as their sense objects mundane sounds and so on, and that is material. Thus a devotee's body can have two aspects, transcendental and material. According to one's level of devotional service, to that degree the transcendental aspects of one's body become prominent and the material aspects diminish. This transformation is described in the following verse from the Bhagavatam. Bhakti parashanubhavo viraktir anyatra chaisa chika ekakara prapadyamanasya yatasnatasyus tushti pushti shura payorugasham. Devotion, direct experience of the Supreme Lord, and detachment from other things. These three occur simultaneously for one who has taken shelter of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, in the same way that pleasure, nourishment, and relief from hunger come simultaneously and increasingly with each bite for a person engaged in eating. When one achieves totally pure love of God, the material portions of the body disappear, and the body becomes completely spiritual. Nonetheless, so as not to disturb the false opinions of atheists, and so as to protect the confidentiality of devotional service, the Supreme Lord usually has his illusory energy exhibit the demise of the gross body. An example of this is the disappearance of the Yadavas during the Mosala Leela. Sometimes, however, to proclaim the excellence of Bhakti Yoga, Krishna will allow a devotee to go back to Godhead in his self-same body, as in the case of Dhruva Maharaj. We can cite evidence for this point from the 25th chapter of the 11th canto, text 32. Ine me nirjita somya guna jivena chittacha bhakti yogena manishto madbhavaya prapadyate. A living entity who conquers the modes of material nature, which are manifested from the mind, can dedicate himself to me, Krishna, by the process of devotional service, and thus attain pure love for me. Here the Lord states that the defeat and destruction of that which is composed of the modes of material nature can be brought about only by the process of devotional service. Therefore, what we should understand from the present verse of the Bhagavatam is that the gopis who could not go to see Krishna had their inauspicious material bodies removed or burned up, while their auspicious spiritual bodies, far from being destroyed, simply grew more prominent because of the ecstasy the gopis felt by embracing Krishna in meditation. Thus their bondage was completely destroyed. By the help of Yoga Maya, they got free from ignorance and also from the prohibitions of their husbands and other relatives. We should not make the mistake of explaining this falling away of the gopis' bodies as being a result of their dying. As the Lord himself states, Ya maya kridita ratram vanesmin vraja astita alabdarasa kalyanyo mapur madvirya chintaya. Some of those all auspicious gopis could not directly join me in enjoying the rasa dance on that night in this Vrindavan forest, yet still they achieved my association by remembering my transcendental pastimes. By using the word kalyanya in this verse, the Lord implies, even though these gopis wanted to give up their bodies because of their husbands' prohibitions and the torment of separation from me, for them to die at the very beginning of the most auspicious festival of the rasa dance would have been displeasing to me and thus inauspicious, so they did not die. More evidence that the gopis who were prevented from going to see Krishna did not physically die is provided by a statement of Sri Sukadev's ladder in this canto. Ta uchor udhavam pratas tat sande shagata smriti. Then they, the gopis, replied to Uddhava, feeling satisfied because his message had reminded them of Krishna. Here we understand that the gopis speaking to Uddhava were the ones who had not had the chance to participate directly in the rasa dance because of being held captive in their homes. Thus, the conclusion is that they gave up their material bodies without dying. Parched by the intense heat of separation, their material bodies gave up their materiality and became purely spiritual, just like the bodies of such great devotees as Dhruva Maharaj. This is the meaning of the gopis giving up their bodies. The following analogy illustrates the statuses of the various gopis. By observing 7 or 8 ripe mangoes on a tree, we can ascertain that all the fruits on the tree are ripe. Then we can pick them all and bring them home, where in due course the sun's rays and other agents will make them fine-looking, fragrant, and delicious, fit to be offered to the king for his enjoyment. When the time comes for the king to take his meal, a discriminating servant can choose those fruits ready to offer him. From the appearance of the fruits, the servant can tell which are ripe in the middle, but still raw on the outside, and thus not yet fit for the king. By the application of a special heating process, these remaining fruits will become ripe in 2 or 3 days, and then they too will be ready to offer to the king. Similarly, among the Munichari gopis who took birth in Gokul, those who completely gave up the materiality of their bodies and very early in life achieved purely spiritual bodies were able to remain untouched by any other man. Thus, Yoga Maya allowed them to join the Nitya Siddha and other advanced gopis when they went to meet Krishna. Other Munichari gopis still retained some connection with the external material body, but even they, after being parched by the heat of separation from Sri Krishna, gave up the materiality of their bodies and assumed perfectly transcendental bodies, purified of all taint of contact with other men. On the night of the rasa dance, Yoga Maya sent some of these gopis out behind those who had already gone out. Others who Yoga Maya saw still had a slight amount of contamination. She kept back to further purify with the heat of separation, and then she sent them out on some other night. After enjoying the pleasures of the rasa dance and other pastimes with Krishna, the Munichari gopis who had participated went back to their homes when the night was over, as did the Nitya Siddha and other advanced gopis. But now Yoga Maya protected these Munichari gopis from the material association of their husbands. In other words, these gopis were devoid of any selfish attachment for husband, children, and so on. Since these gopis were thoroughly immersed in the great ocean of love for Krishna, their breasts dried up so that they could not feed their infants, and to their family members they appeared as if haunted by ghosts. In conclusion, it is not unseemly that the gopis who were previously in material association joined in the rasa dance. Some authorities, however, maintain that the gopis who were kept back in their houses did not have children. According to them, whenever such words as apatya, children, are used in verses yet to come, these words refer to the children of co-wives, to adopted children, or to nephews or nieces. Please join me in praying to our acharyas to understand. Om Jnana Timirandasya Jananjana Chalakaya Chakshurumilitam Jena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Vishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Bhagavatam Tadadisha Padandiyam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Radhikam Shri Guru Vaishnavam Shri Rupam Sarvijata Sahana Raghunatham Vitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savdutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Pada Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakam Vitamscha He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandhu Jayapate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namustate Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sudhe Devi Pranamami Hari Pre Pancha Kalpatarivascha Kripa Sanjivyevacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Nam Om Vishnu Padaya Vishnu Prasthaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swaminiti Namine Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatara Shatarine Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadara Shivasati Gaura Bhaktivinoda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Thank you all for being at Srimad Bhagavatam class. I pray that each of you sincerely bless me so I can speak according to Guru, Sadhu, and Shastra for my own purification and to, as a service to you all, that you all come closer to pure devotional service by hearing the Bhagavatam. So I have to say that I had this idea, yes, I'm going to go to bed early last night. And then it was a very busy day and I didn't have time to prepare for this class. And then I sat down and read this purport and was like, Hare Krishna. I know I'm always unqualified to give Bhagavatam class, but especially after reading this purport, I felt like this verse in purport, I told my husband, I can't give class tomorrow. Would you like to give class? And he was like, you will give class. And so what I did was I stayed up very late and I listened to a class on this verse and purport by my spiritual master, Radha Swami, which was available on ISKCON Desire Tree. And I read and read and read, and I WhatsApped my Shiksha Guru Giri Govardhan Prabhu and asked him questions. And by the mercy of my Shiksha Guru Giri Govardhan Prabhu and my spiritual master Radha Swami, this class will be a combination of not my realizations, but their realizations. So I feel very good about it now. Haribol. And it's already 7:45, so I only have 15 minutes to speak anyways, and my notes are like this long. You could speak for literally 10 hours on this verse and still not even begin to drop the surface. So let's see how far we get here. Basically, what is the whole message, the whole purport of this section, really? It's that the gopis gave everything. They surrendered everything to Krishna. They were not attached to anything material. When Krishna played his flute, they were milking the cows or taking their own meal or feeding their fathers or their husbands or having cakes in the oven or doing household duties or so many different things. And the second they heard the flute, they didn't even bother taking the cake out of the oven or explaining to their father or husband where they were going or anything. They just left everything the moment that Krishna played his flute. And they knew they were going to the forest to be with Krishna, but that Krishna would not be with them forever because eventually he would have to go back to Mother Yashoda. And then what would they have? They left their families. They wouldn't be able to go back. They left everything. They left everything to be with Krishna. So they were completely surrendered and not worried about any material impediments. We understand, Radhaswami explained that when the gopis did go back the next morning, they actually were welcomed back into their homes. So Krishna did take care. But this is the kind of surrender that they had. And Radhaswami, he asked in the lecture I was listening to, are we ready to take material risks in our service to Krishna and give everything completely to Krishna? It's explained in these verses that some of the gopis were able to get away and see Krishna, and some of the gopis were restrained and not able to go and see Krishna physically. But they meditated on him so deeply that they realized his embrace by meditating on him as their male lover. They were meditating on him in pure love. And the pain of their separation and being held back and not being able to go and see Krishna burned away all their previous karma. So we might think, how could the gopis have previous karma? But it's explained by Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur that there was actually different categories of gopis. Many of the gopis were Nitya Siddhas and some direct expansions of Radharani even. And some of them were Jivatmas, purely liberated souls who descended from Goloka Vrindavan to assist Krishna in his pastimes. And some of them were sadhana siddhas, Jivatmas who were conditioned by forgetfulness, but by association with saintly people and performing sadhana, they had perfected their lives. And amongst these, there were different categories. So the personified Vedas, in their next birth, they became gopis. And in Naimisharanya, when Lord Ram was traveling, there was a group of great sages, devotees of Krishna actually. And when they saw Lord Ram, it awakened conjugal love in their hearts. But they were embarrassed, so they actually didn't say anything to Lord Ram because he had vowed to only accept one wife. But Lord Ram understood their desire, and he told them in his next incarnation of Krishna, they would become gopis. So some of these gopis were born into families of Brajbasis, and from early childhood, they got the association of other gopis who were Nitya Siddhas. And that purified mood of the Gopi Bhav developed in their hearts. And although they were so elevated in consciousness, there were some traces of previous karma in their hearts. And Krishna wanted to purify any tiny remnants of material conditioning from their heart. And for those gopis, he would not allow them to come to the rasa dance by arrangement of fathers or husbands. And the pain they experience really, it cannot be understood. Even swallowing the poison of Lord Shiva, that pain, like the poison of the ocean, that pain is insignificant compared to the suffering the gopis had to undergo. But that suffering externally was internally a form of great ecstasy. So when Krishna wants to further purify his devotee, he oftentimes puts them into suffering. And following in the footsteps of gopis, that devotee withdraws from everything else and just intensely thinks of Krishna and becomes purified. So they become perfect Braja gopis. Prabhupada explains when a sadhana siddha becomes a pure devotee in this world, before he's allowed to go to Goloka Vrindavan, he actually goes to a universe where Krishna is enacting his eternal Leela to participate in the Leela and get trained up by the Nitya Siddhas. And then any last traces of karma, Krishna arranges to burn that out. And just like Lord Chaitanya was fond of pure, polished white rice, he would glorify the taste of fine rice offered as prasadam. But rice, when it comes from the ground, it has a husk, and that husk is not digestible or offerable to Krishna. The rice within is pure, and Krishna is longing for it, but as long as that husk is there, we can't put it on the altar. So how do we remove the husk? By beating it. Some people literally put their rice on the road, and so that trucks will run over it. And when the trucks run over it, it takes the husk away. That's pretty intense. Trucks are literally driving over the rice. So Krishna knows what we want, and he also knows what we need. And when we are devotees, even to the level of gopis, Krishna knows what it takes to take that husk of false ego and material attachment away from us. So we have to become completely detached from the husk of material desire and ego to be truly offerable to Krishna. Sometimes he might put us through emotional, mental, or physical suffering. Why does a devotee have to go through this? Because Krishna wants them to be a perfect offering of love at his lotus feet and bring them back to Goloka Vrindavan, sometimes through turmoil of crisis and suffering that it takes place. Tatenu kampam sushamikshamanom. This is literally like Prabhupada's favorite verse. He always quotes it in like so many classes. And one who is in the face of great suffering is able to gratefully thank Krishna with folded palms and remember him. That person is alone eligible for liberation. That's what this verse says. So when we're put into terrible suffering, what should be our consciousness? Our consciousness should be, I'm actually so fortunate. Krishna is giving me an opportunity to be eligible for liberation. So the gopis who were held back by the arrangement, and in that turmoil they were purified. Krishna from within their hearts embraced them. After they went through the terrible turmoil of separation, even at home they were eligible to enter into the Rasa Leela, because Krishna from within their hearts was dancing with them and embracing them. There are no material impediments to Krishna consciousness. Our only impediment is being unwilling to surrender to Krishna and our attachment to our own independent ideas. Prabhupada, when he was on his deathbed, he was still inspiring devotees all over the world to surrender to him. So until we come to the stage of complete abandonment of material attachments for the sake of reciprocating with the desire of Krishna, we cannot understand what is the Rasa Leela. Therefore, we must hear the story of the Rasa Leela in this way. We must understand the dignity and the depth of the utter surrender of the gopis of Vrindavan. This is preliminary to the gopis' meeting with Krishna. Srimad Bhagavatam is the topmost of all transcendental literatures. It is the only literature of the Vedas besides Chaitanya Leela biographies that deal with unmotivated, uninterrupted loving service to the Lord without tinge of dharma, artha, kama, and moksha. We must be the servant of the servants of the person Bhagavats. So these gopis did not die. Thus, the conclusion is that they gave up their material bodies without dying. Parched by the intense heat of separation, their material bodies gave up their materiality and became purely spiritual, just like the bodies of such great devotees as Dhruva Maharaj. This is the meaning of the gopis giving up their bodies. Other Munichari gopis still retain some connection with the external material body, but even they, after being parched by the heat of separation from Sri Krishna, gave up the materiality of their bodies and assumed perfectly transcendental bodies, purified of all taint of contact with other men. On the night of the Rasa dance, Yoga Maya sent some of these gopis out behind those who had already gone out. Others, who Yoga Maya saw still had a slight amount of contamination, she kept back to further purify with the heat of separation, and then she sent them out on some other night. So it's not that they never got to go to the Rasa Leela. Sometimes I think people think that, like when they read this section, they're like, oh, these gopis never got to go to the Rasa Leela. But they actually got to go to the Rasa Leela. They just got sent out on another night for the Rasa Leela after being completely purified by this experience. Therefore, what we should understand from the present verse of the Bhagavatam is that the gopis who could not go to see Krishna had their inauspicious material bodies removed or burned up, while their auspicious spiritual bodies, far from being destroyed, simply grew more prominent because of the ecstasy the gopis felt by embracing Krishna in meditation. They didn't die, but their material bodies disappeared and their spiritual bodies remained. They then actively participated in the Leela. So after this happened, their material bodies are finished, but they're living in their spiritual bodies, and then they're actively for the rest of Krishna's pastimes, participating in Krishna's pastimes. Someone asked Radhaswami a very interesting question at the end of his class that he gave. They said, even if you desire something, unless you deserve it, Krishna will not fulfill that desire. So on one hand, we have independence to desire, but on the other hand, that desire is fulfilled only when we deserve it. And so this, how does this relate to what we're talking about? It's like, we can desire to enter into the rasa dance with Krishna. The gopis, they were desiring, these gopis who got held back, who eventually did make it to the rasa dance, but at the beginning they didn't. The answer is, do you know what it means by deserve? Deserve means how much you're willing to sacrifice for that desire. Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur said, first deserve, then desire. It's a question of willingness. To the degree you're willing to make sacrifices to fulfill that desire, to that degree you deserve. Krishna sees your desire, but he sees how true that desire is by how much you're willing to give up for that desire. Like the gopis. The gopis were willing to give up everything for that desire. They were just completely ready. Like, Krishna, I am completely yours. No material desire, only desire to serve Krishna, to love Krishna, to be with Krishna, to dance with Krishna. The Rasa Leela is the highest expression of conjugal love. Here you go, Vardhan Prabhu and His Holiness Ranaswami Prabhu ki jai. So we have 2 minutes left. Hari bol. This class goes so short. So does anybody have any comments or questions? Yes.
My Krishna, wonderful class, my goodness. And the purport was extraordinary. And we can only reflect at how wonderful is Krishna, that no matter what category or what stage of purification we're at, Krishna will make some avenue, some path, some way that we can go to a higher level and to the perfectional stage, because Krishna is calling us. I always wonder when I hear this story, how come only the girls went? What was wrong with these guys? They heard the flute. Why didn't they? And not only did they not run out, they were stopping these girls from going, And I was asking that one time. Mars was saying something about how we're actually all feminine. And feminine not in the sense of what kind of body we have, but feminine in the sense that we're meant to give pleasure to Krishna. So we're hearing about feminine personalities being attracted to Krishna. And they went there to please the Lord. And you made these points perfectly anyway, but Krishna is so wonderful that no matter where we are, no matter who we are, no matter how fallen, no matter how long, then Krishna is going to make an arrangements for us to go up. And Madan Gopal gave this amazing class a little while ago, and he said, if just once in our life we say, Lord, I'm yours. Even if we don't say it with tremendous sincerity, but if we say that, then Krishna is going to draw a line from where we are to where we can be. And everything else, sooner or later, we'll get there. How wonderful is Krishna. Well, glory to Srila Prabhupada. Sorry to talk so long.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much. Anybody else have anything?
Hard to see in 30 seconds.
Yeah.
It'll be enough to grow.
So if we see a gopi wearing an apron and playing the guitar, that must be Adi. And if we see a gopi with a beard, that must be Bhima Prabhu. Would you like to say something?
I'm a mushroom, Prabhu.
Yeah,
I'm a mushroom. A female mushroom.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, we're all female. Thank you, Champak. Extraordinary class. So wonderful. How does one
Conch shell.
all right, anyways, no problem. Thank you. Hare Krishna. Okay, darshan time. Cameras on, please, if you can. Okay, I think we're past the conch. All right. It's nice seeing everybody, Venetia. Venetia is building a retreat center in her backyard. And she said she would host a Srimad Bhagavatam class retreat one day. Thank you, Venetia. We look forward to it. Bhima Prabhu, Papi C, Sharmila, Bruce Prabhu, Yogeshwari, Dana, Krishna, Radharani, Amrita Kishori, Andrea, Suzanne, Domi, thank you so much. Everybody listening online, thank you so much for tuning in. Come back tomorrow. Let the truck of Krishna consciousness run over your life and separate the husk from the rice. Bhima Prabhu once famously said that he has an empty husk for a head. Is that still the case, Bhim?
Yes, I can hear the echo of your voice right now on the inside of my skull.
Okay, all right. Okay, thank you very much, dear devotees. Come again tomorrow. Don't go anywhere. Hare Krishna.